What if everything you thought you knew about horses, about connection and communication, was just the beginning? Kim Walnes is an Olympic equestrian legend. She and her horse, the Gray Goose, climbed to the top of the sport, ranking third in the world, and as a result of their partnership, Gray was inducted into the U.S. Eventing Association Hall of Fame. But Kim's legacy isn't just about medals or accolades. It's about something deeper. I first met Kim after Sarah Ferris connected with her at a centered riding symposium, and we invited her to the farm for a clinic. That was years ago, and so much has shifted since then, both in my own journey and in the evolution of Bramblewood Stables. But I still remember that day vividly. The weather was relentless, torrential rain, hail, high winds, bursts of bright sunshine, as if the elements were demanding my attention, forcing me into a deeper connection with the natural world. And what I took away from Kim's wisdom was something that shaped everything that I do now. Accolades mean nothing without connection. Kim Walnes isn't just a decorated Olympic equestrian. She is a mentor, life coach, animal communicator, writer, and modern-day sage, channeling messages through her current equine partner, Gideon Goodhart. She has guided thousands of people towards a deeper understanding of themselves, their animals, and the world around them. And what makes her uniquely suited for this? She's walked both paths, earning her place in the traditional horse world, only to return and show us another way. This conversation is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and I can't wait to share it with you. It is so wonderful to have you here with me today, Kim Walnes.
Thank you, Kim. It's a joy to be here.
It's been so long since I've been close. I've followed your work in the years since we had the incredible opportunity to have you come to the farm and do a clinic with us. And I didn't even look back to see how long ago that was.
Me either. It's a long time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really were the first person who helped me start to make this deep shift into approaching the horses in a completely different way. And I think for so many of us, it was centered riding becomes the way in to thinking of bodies and physiology and our physiology connecting with the horse's physiology. And then for me, it was one step then deeper into kind of mind-blowing shift in how my connection to my relationship could be with my horse. I want to hear your words and capture your words more so than my story today. But can you tell me how that journey from your writing resume is what every little girl dreams of? You made your way to the Olympics. You had this incredible relationship with your Olympic mount, and your work has shifted over the years into this deep connection with the energy of the horses. Can you tell me about just what led you there?
Okay. Yes, I can. Gray and I had a very deep connection, but I describe it now as we were business partners. And even then, I knew we were business partners. If I was upset, because I went through my divorce when right not too long after I retired from competition. And Gray would say, I don't want to hear it. Go see the pony. That's his job. He was not a huggy horse. He was strictly business. He did not want to be messed with if we were not tacking up, untacking, doing something that was related to business. He was all business, and he loved it. He enjoyed it. He'd get so excited when we'd start packing the trunks. And yeah, I talked to him. He was such a difficult horse. And it's interesting, the more I find out about geese, I realized the more appropriate his name was. I mean, I named him because he was awkward on the ground and he was poetry in motion when he was running and jumping. And he was frightened of everything. And, you know, we will have that phrase, you silly goose. So those were all the reasons. But then I find out that geese are such fierce fighters. And that was Gray to a T. He was a fierce fighter.
So he really captured that energy.
He captured that energy, and his whole relationship to our outlook on life was that the best defense is a good offense. He was not he was a difficult horse to understand. So he taught me that it was okay to be unconventional, because unconventional was what was the only thing that worked with him. You couldn't make that horse do anything, but he would work with you if you were polite about it and explained it to him. So he opened that door to a deeper understanding of the intelligence of horses.
So in the beginning, as you guys were really starting to form your relationship, can you tell me about some of the first questions he asked you that made you look at horsemanship from a different perspective? What was some of the initial difficulty that you guys had to work through and find an unconventional approach to?
Well, first he didn't trust me any more than any other human, no matter how much I talked to him or sat with him. But my daughter was, let me see, that was 1970. My daughter was 2 when I started working with the Gray. He was not mine. I didn't buy him. Right? I rode him for a year before we bought him. He belonged to the stable where we rode. And Gray Goose loved baby anythings, whatever. It didn't matter if it was puppies, kittens, children, little kids. And he fell in love with Andy. And because Andy only came with me, he began to transfer some trust to me. But he stumbled a lot. He ran off with me truly, literally on a daily basis. He threw me on a daily basis for a long time. He was just a frightened horse and remained so his entire life. The entire world was out to get him. So he was not a really self-confident horse at all. I had to really build his confidence. And of course, then he got to be very self-confident in later years, which was really cool. I had to just find my way. I didn't really know. I mean, but every horse that I owned was like that. I didn't have help. And they all had their issues that were the reason why I got them. The reason I got them was because they all had such issues.
Were you working towards Olympic goals when you and he were?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was my dream. I was always searching for that horse. But I didn't think he was that horse when I started, because he tripped and stumbled and fell and bucked, and he didn't rear. He was not a rearer, but boy, could he bolt. He could bolt and buck at the same time, which is, most horses don't do that. They bolt or they buck, but he could do both. And there was only one person who could stick him, who could stay on when he did that kind of thing, and that was the young trainer at the barn. He could ride him through that, but I couldn't. And I finally figured it out. I just kept thinking about rodeo cowboys and what did they do, and just pretended I had a Western saddle on there and I was on a bronc. Threw my hand back, stuck my feet out in front, and sat way, way, way back, and then I could sit it. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I
Thank
just
you for saying that, because we talk so much about the end result of big journeys, but we don't talk enough about the really hard beginnings.
Right. This was a really tough beginning, but through it all, and interestingly, I was coming back from a serious illness and injury and had to build my own riding confidence back up. And when I came back to the barn to start, I went back home to the States. We were living in Ireland at the time, and I went back home to the States to recover and rode my mom's horse, who was the perfect horse for me to start back up on, until I felt confident enough and felt healthy enough. And then Andy and I came back to Ireland. My daughter and I came back to Ireland. And when I got to the barn, I said, I want one horse. I want one horse to work on. I don't want to just ride every young horse you have and work on that. I want one horse to bond with and work with. And they said, sure, pick one. And I said, that one. And they said, any horse but that one. You don't want that one.
And that was the one.
And that was the one. That was Gray. They just called him the Gray. That was his name at the barn. He was the only gray horse in the barn, so he was just the Gray.
Yeah.
And no matter how many times he threw me or bolted with me, I just never gave up on him. But I would come home sometimes, and my husband would say, "So how'd it go? How'd it go with the horse today?" And I say, "God, I feel so sorry for whoever buys this horse. He's a mess. He's just a mess." Fast forward one year, and I thought, this horse on his own out in the field, nothing could hold this horse in. He could jump anything to get where he wanted to go. And I knew he had the speed. I knew he could jump height and width because I'd seen him do it when he was leaving. And I knew that he was incredibly graceful in his movement when no one was on him. And I thought he actually does have the components. So I talked my husband into getting him and bringing him back to the States. We brought him back with a mare. And then I just, because of all that we had been through and the fact that I could tell that he understood things, I just kept talking to him and explaining things. And I got a lot of ridicule for that when back in the day, because I
Really?
would sit in his stall the night before cross country, and I would tell him the course. I'd go through every bit of it, all the ground in between, and what my plan was, and what we were going to do. And it worked. It worked, including even in Holland one time. We were there for Bocolo, and there was a shortcut that we discovered walking the course, and it cut out a good, it was worthwhile to take the shortcut. However, it was unmown grass, it was tall, and there was a hidden ditch with water in the grass. I mean, you could not see it. But interestingly, because I have always followed my inner voice in this journey, no matter how weird what it tells me to do, I've always followed my inner voice. And my inner voice, before we left for Holland, had put the idea in my head to teach Gray to jump even when nothing was there. If I said the word jump, I wanted him to leave the ground, and yeah. And so I taught him that. And then lo and behold, here was the opportunity to use it. I just love that. That has happened to me all my life. When I follow my inner voice, then boom, there it is. So he taught me about the intelligence of horses and how smart they really are, and how much more they understand than we're told they do. We're told they can't, but they can do so much more than we're told they can do. But to get back to your original question, the whole deep connection, spiritual nature of a relationship, that came from Mr. Goodhart, from Gideon. He came here to spread that message.
When did you and Gideon become partners? And how does that fit into did he cross over with Gray Goose being in your life, or
Mhm.
was that okay?
Mhm. So Gray was present at Gideon's birth because Gideon is the third generation of my breeding. I had his mother. God bred his mother, but I had the sire and the dam. and and I bred her to a Connemara pony because I wanted something with a lot of brains. I wanted something shorter because I knew this was going to be my horse in my elder years. And this is Grange Finsparrow was a really incredible Connemara stallion. He did it all. And the day he was born, Gray was in the paddock that stall door opened into. So he had his head over the door, like comforting Destiny, Gideon's mother, the whole time. He was there the whole time that Gideon was born. And then he mentored Gideon right up until his death. So 3 years that I had Gideon kind of farmed out where he could run and be with other horses, because in Pennsylvania, the part of Pennsylvania where I live, everything's chopped up into little paddocks and pastures and things. And there was no opportunity. So I had him farmed out to people I trusted. And then I brought him back when he was 4.5. And
So
and he and Gray were boarded at the same place.
really,
Mm-hmm. next to each other. Their stalls were next to each other. And whenever I would ride this young stallion, when I started him, I started him within everything. And there were mares not very far from the unfenced arena. There were mares that belonged to somebody at the next door neighbor's farm. And they would all come to see the young stallion, of course, when I would bring him out, because mares know when there are stallions around. And Gray would come. Gray had free run of the place. He had that privilege that, elder famous horses get. The owner of the farm was aware of that, and Gray had free run of the place. And Gray would come from wherever he was, and he would stand up on the little hill where that fence was between those mares and Gideon. And he would watch our entire session, and he would help me. And I'd say, Gray, tell Gideon about such and such and such. And then Gideon would start doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very cool. No, he coached Gideon. There's no doubt about it.
And when did you realize that Gideon was here to lead you into a deeper understanding of the connections?
Okay, that there was a definite moment. There were two moments that let me know he was different than other. I mean, well, three. When he was born, I guess Destiny had him like halfway out, so the head and the four quarters were out, and she took a break. So I broke the sac so he could breathe, just in case the umbilical cord was caught anywhere. He looked me right in the eyes when I broke that sac, and I heard in my head, "Here I am, and I'm here for you." So that was a moment that gave me quite a bit of pause, that this newly born creature, whoa, how strong is that? He named himself Gideon, and everybody laughed and made fun of him, saying, oh, he's going to be in the bedside table at every hotel because of the Gideon Bible. I mean, this was West Virginia, it was, people just they just didn't take to that name.
I made a joke before the kitten, and I just recently got a kitten who was pre-named Gideon before he arrived.
Yes.
And I have been joking about putting him in a drawer.
Oh, no, don't do that.
So
No.
I'll stop joking with him about that.
Yeah. Joking, human joking is not understood by babies or animals or the universe. Yeah.
What do
So
you think it is about humans? What part of us feels that need to make the jokes?
we're trained, I think it's a form of, we don't feel we can say what we truly want to say. So we make a joke, we make it a joke. Oh, I'm just joking when I say this, but it is perceived by others in a hurtful way. We're just trained to tamp those feelings down and not say anything. And as I've gotten older, I am on people about that. I just don't permit it.
Yeah.
Just like, no, that's hurtful. That's hurtful joking. There is nothing funny about it in any way, shape, or form. And no.
It doesn't create connection.
It does the opposite. It does the opposite. It makes people build defenses or resentment. A lot of resentment comes about.
Animals and the babies and they just don't get that energy.
No, none of it. No, it doesn't even go in. They do not understand negatives either. Like, don't do that. They only hear the do that. They don't hear the don't part. So with Gideon, when everybody kept laughing at him, so he's like a day old now, and I say to him, Gid, I really honor your name, and I agree that that's your name. I said, but other humans don't understand it, and they're laughing at you. And I said, I don't like that. So I said, how about this? With humans, we often have a name, but we're given a nickname, a different name, which is our baby name, is how I put it. I'm trying to put it in terms he could understand. And I said, I think you need to choose another name. So right off the bat, I started getting images from that film, Dances with Wolves, of Kevin Costner on his buckskin horse, right? And I'm racking my brain trying to think of that horse's name in the movie, thinking that's what he wanted. And he goes, no, he says, the man. So that character's name was John Dunbar. And Gideon was born, I mean, he is a buckskin, but he was much more evidently a buckskin when he was born, since he's a sooty and doesn't look buckskin at all now. But so his name was Dunbar for his first 7 years, and everybody loved Dunbar. They thought Dunbar was great. And one day I go out to the field, and every time I would call him, he would come. Went out to the field and I said, Dunbar, I'm here. And I didn't even get an ear. So I called again, and he said in my head, I'm an adult now and I want my name back. So I had to let everybody know at the boarding stable that his name was truly Gideon, and he wasn't going to work with them unless they called him that. And of course, they thought I was insane until they experienced it for themselves. He would just ignore them and not work with them unless they called him Gideon. So that was one door opener. And the second one was when this little child, had to be about 3, walked up behind us at the boarding stable. She was there with somebody else, and I don't know how they lost sight of her, but they did. And this little kid walks up with this leaf in her hand, just a leaf. And she says, can I give this to your horse? And I said, sure, thinking she'd come up front. And no, she stood right by his hock and offered this leaf. And Gideon very, very, very carefully, without moving his tail or anything, reached around and took that leaf so gently from her little tiny fingers. And I thought, okay. And then on Gray's 30th birthday party, that was in 2000, I offered as a party favor pony rides on Gideon, where I led Gideon and I put the Western saddle on him, and people could I just lead them around a little bit, and then they could say they rode a stallion, right? Which made them feel great. And everything was going great until the very last person, who was the mother of one of the, of the kids that boarded there. And she got on, and I started to lead Gideon, and he planted his feet and would not move. And I said, come on, this is I'm thinking he's tired. And I said, this is the last person. Well, please, could you? And he said, oh, no, that's not the problem. He said, she's frightened. And I looked back at her and I thought, she doesn't look frightened. So I walked up to her and I put my hand on her thigh and I said, how are you feeling right now? And she said, honestly, I'm scared to death. I didn't know that, but he knew that. And he knew it would be inappropriate to carry her. And that turned me onto a whole nother area of Gideon, about what a caretaker he was of humans and how respectful he was of our feelings, and how important it was to him that we understand and work with our feelings. So I helped her feel more confident, and he walked right off with her and she had a good time. But that really put me on notice. And that's how we ended up eventually. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. He had to kick my butt a couple of times to get me out of my own patterns. But we wound up doing life coaching together and spiritual coaching together, because that's what he came here for. It's interesting. I always felt like Gray was my vehicle, so to speak, to gain respect in the world, so that people, and recognition in the world. And I realized very quickly that I was Gideon's vehicle for the same purpose, that so he could reach a wider audience of people. Because anybody who meets him is just like, whoa, he's like a Buddhist monk in a horse's body. And I said,
And I feel that across the screen, just by following the words that you share on the internet, that he gifts the world. And we live in such a cool time in the horse world. There's so many changes that are coming together, it feels like, that a lot of those who have been doing deeper soul work in the background, there's space for them coming forward now.
yes.
And what are you experiencing? Because you have lived the most traditional type of horsemanship to whatever it is that the horse industry is turning into now. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey to watch it unfold and to understand how deep the longing has always been from horse people to experience horses in a different way. That soul bond, that heart and soul bond, they're even, people didn't feel like they could express it because the traditional horse industry poo-pooed it because horses were utilitarian vehicles, and they were dumb animals. So many people are attracted to horses because of what they represent: freedom, grace, beauty, and being who they truly are. We long for those ourselves, and yet society frowns upon that because, if you're being who you truly are, well, then you're not easily controlled. And if you're being who you really are, you might be experienced as being uncomfortable for other people. And so that gets squashed very early on in childhood for most folks. It gets squashed. You have to be like everybody else or you won't survive. Yeah. And I never bought into that, but I had to do it very surreptitiously because otherwise I wouldn't have survived being born into a military family. Control was everything. I just learned to be sneaky, and that's how I got through the whole team experience, was just being sneaky. I would say, yes, sir. And then I'd go do what I knew I needed to do with Gray.
And by team, you're talking about the U.S. equestrian team,
yes,
correct?
The U.S. U.S. eventing, the U.S. 3-day event team. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was purely coming out of military traditions, correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew how to handle that. Everybody else was like, "Rah," and I thought, no, you just are polite and you say, yes, sir. And then you go do what you need to do, as long as it's, well, and Jack Legoff, the coach, I really had a lot of respect for him. He really knew what he was doing. He wasn't, now that I know more about dressage, he wasn't the best teacher. He knew what to do himself, but he wasn't trained by being told what to do. He was trained by riding horses on the lunge for years and figuring out how to sit. So that didn't make it good. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let me just see if I can condense.
There's so much. I feel like I could talk to you for 6 weeks and we wouldn't scratch the surface.
There is a lot. I have lived a lot in these more than 7 decades.
And it's that making that transition from like having lived the experience of the horse world being extraordinarily traditional from military traditions.
Oh, yes.
And then into the space that we're at now, where people are softening into looking at horses from a different way.
Yes.
And being vocal about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and being vocal about it. So back then, if I got asked a direct question by, say, John Strasburger, the editor of the Chronicle of the Horse, I have heard that you talked to Gray and tell him the course the night before. And I would say, yes, I do. That is exactly what I do. And then, of course, I got the reputation. And I was into homeopathy and chiropractic and massage and acupuncture and lasers, all that stuff. I've always been a pioneer out there on the forefront. It's a lonely road, and everybody just says, oh, you're a wacko. But wow, the horses did for me. So now watching things starting to, witnessing the change and the bumpy road that happened, through that, and how people would make claims and everybody would buy into it, but it was still a method. You can't have a methodology because every horse is unique any more than you can have a methodology with humans. You can't do that because we're all different and we all have different learning patterns. And oh, gee, horses have different learning patterns too. Who knew? I find that in today's world, sometimes we can go overboard. And there are people who are, Gideon's coming through. They put their horses on a pedestal and they worship them. The horse knows everything. Our job is to stay out of the horse's way. This is what people think. And they love their horse, and they think because in humanity, as a predator species, and through all the ethnic groups, especially women, well, there are a lot of men too, who use food as a way of showing love. And horses don't do that. Horses don't do that. They don't like take a bite of grass and hand it to another horse when they have a deep bond. That's not what they do. They trust one another. That's what makes them have a deeper bond, is through trust and reliance and knowing that that horse is going to be who that horse is on the inside all the time.
What I hear Gideon saying here, and I don't mean to cut you off, but
No.
just so that we're all following the thought of how we got from there to there. What I hear him saying is, on the flip side of that, horse is the utilitarian tool here to do what we need them to do. On the flip side of that is putting the horse on a pedestal where we're basically feeding them our human projections and calling that love.
Thank you.
Does that sound right?
Exactly right. And calling it love. And we worship them. He says it becomes a form of worship. He said, that's just wrong. We don't like it. And you're going to get hurt doing that. That is not cool. Every single creature put on a pedestal falls, because no one is perfect. Horses certainly aren't perfect, and they're not going to be the projection of human love. This is just, they're going to be themselves. And you can't buy a horse's love. That just does not work. You cannot do it.
And do you find in a lot of the cases that you have worked with or has crossed your way, of the tough ones, do you find that humans use that projected love in a kind of subconscious excuse to not have to do the work on themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it couldn't be coming from them, because the horse is a lesser being, but they're not. All beings have equal importance in the universe. All beings, no matter how tiny, even. All beings have, so I'm just going to say this out loud, are sentient. They're sentient. All beings are sentient. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've rescued a bee that's born out of season or gotten exhausted or whatever. Or, I find them in various places, and I give them a little something to revive them, and they never ever fly away without stopping to look up, and you feel this wave of thanks that come from them.
I have had the same experience with bees,
Yeah,
and it's
bees.
mind-blowing to me. Like, it's so direct.
Yeah, bees are pretty special beings. They're very special beings. There's an incredible book I'll let you know about later.
Is it
It's a book written by bees through their beekeeper? So she has a chapter, and then she gives the bees input to her about that. That's mind-blowing.
I would love to link to any book in the notes for this that you'd like to spread out and let people know about in the world. So after we finish up today, I would love if you would send me a list of things to link to. And this was, I have so many questions that I wanted to explore with you. And again, and this is, we need to sit down more than just one day. But what would you say to someone who's curious about going deeper into their connection with other sentient creatures other than humans, but are skeptical of messages that they're receiving?
That's a part of learning to trust your inner voice and your own self, who you truly are, which is so discouraged in our society, but is necessary for the welfare of this planet, welfare of your own sanity, of the planet's health, and our whole place in the universe. It's really important. So we're like, oh, I couldn't be hearing that, but you did, because it feels different. It feels different. Our mind will block stuff like that, and it'll bring up, self-doubt and all self-worth and all of that stuff. But if we just trust and accept and act upon that, then we find, oh yeah, that is true. that is true. And then we begin to build from there. And then that has ramifications throughout your entire life, which is very cool.
And I often go back to the thought of Pascal's wager of living as if you believe something to test whether it is there or not.
Yes.
And that's what I found to be true in my own life as I've gone as deep as I have up to this point, and I want to go so much deeper with my understanding of the direct communications that's coming from particularly the horses, but
Mm-hmm.
all the animals around me, is just like you said, there's this resonance that is so different,
Yes.
that feels like your cells feel it, like that felt right.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it resonates with you. Yeah, that's a wonderful word, resonance. Yes, that's the precise word.
When did you start to go deeper with Gideon? And let me say, ask, did you care what other people thought in the beginning?
No, by that time, I had gotten to the point where it was so clear to me that what he was saying was the truth. And I knew that he, I was just so clear that he had come to me because I could be his voice. I have had to work through very low self-esteem issues because, I was brought up that I was a piece of garbage and stupid and all of these things. And so no matter what I accomplished in the outer world, the inner voice was still putting me down all the time. I am an empath, a very strong empath. And so unfortunately, I was drawn to partners who were narcissists. And so that squashed me even further. And in one of those times when I was really like down in the mud at the deepest part of the dank pond internally, Gideon threw me. And he threw me so hard that I don't know if I somersault, somebody did observe it, but I came down from a great height on my knees, which was not lost to me, the implications of that I was on my knees. Humility. He ended up cracking the head of my femur, that accident crack, and I had to be non-weight bearing for 6 weeks. So as I was sitting in my room, not able to go outside and do things, that's when he started downloading messages to me. And he said, when you get better, you must go learn more. He said, you must go learn more so we can do this work together. We have to help people. We have to shift this paradigm, and you need to go learn more. So I started, there was a program on TV then, which I can't remember the name of, but there were 2 life coaches in it. One focused on the mental aspect of fear, and the other was focused on spirituality and connecting to the divine within yourself. And so I went to workshops by both those women when I healed to decide which one I wanted to work with, and chose the spiritual path. The other one was just like gobbledygook, but the spirit, that Iyanla Vanzant is the name of the woman, a Black lady from the streets of New York who has risen to great fame. And wow, she ran a really tough 2 years of brutal life coaching school because she, you can't say, oh, this is how I'm going to help fix people. No, you have to fix yourself. You have to fix yourself first and understand yourself first. So then you're speaking from experience, not from your head or books. You're speaking from experience. So I went through moaning and groaning and bitching the whole time as to how hard it was.
You had an initiation.
Oh, it was for sure. Yeah, it was for sure. That's when I knew that this was all for real, and his messages were coming through more. And even there in that school, I had to stay true to my own self and carve my own path, because I didn't tell them that I had been on the United States equestrian team. I didn't tell them about the death of my daughter right away, because I had found that when I share those with people who don't know me, then I get put in a box. I get it put in a box. And I didn't want to be that way. I just wanted to be me. I wanted to find me without labels. And then when they somehow it came out about these things, then everybody was like mad at me for withholding information. And I said, no, you don't understand why I did that. So I just had to work my way through all of that.
And thank you for leading the way with the mention of your daughter's death, because is there anything that you would like to share in what we're talking about today? Or is that a subject that is its own separate thing? But is there anything about her loss that led you deeper to your ability to communicate?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because Andy and I were, I mean, she is my human soulmate on in this lifetime. Andy was abducted and missing for 3 months and found murdered when she was 18. So I had 18 astounding years where we were just like twin souls. Well, when she hit 13, we got to a rough patch, but that was to be expected.
They turn into different creatures at 13.
Oh, yeah, we all do. Horses too. Every being, when it gets to that adolescent phase, is like, we will survive this. In the depths, there are no words for the profundity of the depths of grief and loss that come in those situations. And in mine, I was kind of desperate to connect with her, and I couldn't. And other people were connecting with her. Sometimes people who didn't even know her, and they say, Andy asked me to give you a message. And then I went on a retreat, a 2-week silent retreat, which was just amazing and wonderful. I recommend them to anybody. To be silent and not speak to other people for 2 weeks is astounding. And no screen, no communication with the outside world. And then she started, I got quiet enough in my own self that she was able to communicate with me and in meditation. And she made it really clear to me that it was my grief that was blocking us from being able to communicate. And so it's kind of grown from there. So she's not a constant presence, but she's available if I connect. And then for a subject for another time, I had a near-death experience, and we actually got to be together for that amount of time. But that's another. But that did also deepen our connection and our ability to communicate, which went across the board to Gideon as well. I mean, Gideon is a constant presence in the back of my mind. He is always. It's like, and he only tunes in and says something if it's something catches him, like when he popped in here. It's like, this is the pedestal thing. He's like, we can't stand that when people do that to us. We need help. He says, we need help, we need input, we need guidance. And right from the beginning, I used to call myself, as many women do, or men, the mom. I'm my horse's mom. And right from the very first time I ever said that, he said, "You're not my mom. Destiny is my mom. You're my person." So he has always viewed us as equal partners and not any other relationship. We're equal partners.
I always have a weird aversion to calling or I'll be in conversation with someone and they'll be like, well, you're so and so animal's mom. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
No.
it just feels wrong.
Yeah, it feels wrong to me now. It didn't before, because it was just kind of an accepted thing. But boy, once Gideon said, and he was right off when he was very young, he was like, "No, what are you talking about?"
You're not my mom.
No. And that's always his answer. If I would slip, he'd be like, "Nope, Destiny is my mom. No, you're my person."
What advice do you have for someone who is curious about going deeper
Mm-hmm.
and learning to trust their voice? And I know that that's such a multifaceted question, because I think about my own journey has been years of paring away my old cycles, years and will continue for the rest of my life.
Yes.
This journey into myself and
Mm-hmm.
my core.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for someone who's curious about this, that wants to start exploring things in a deeper way?
I would say start, and Gideon is here affirming that. Start by paying attention to your inner voice. That little voice that says things that you're like, oh, that can't be real. Start experimenting with not only, as Ianla Van Zant said in class one day, not only listening to it, but obeying it. That's the key. That you don't just hear it and say, okay, and then ignore it, but say, all right, maybe you're driving along and it says turn right here. So you start practicing that stuff and you turn right, and nothing, you might find something cool, or you might see something beautiful, or nothing at all might happen in your perception. But just the act of obeying it, that your inner voice starts to give the blocks inside you permission to start melting away so that you can connect more deeply. And as you begin to connect more deeply and trust your own self, then you can start to trust what you might perceive from the outside as coming from the outside, because we're all connected. We are, every single spiritual practice, that is a common theme. We are all one. That's truth. And you begin to experience that, because I don't know why humanity decided to separate itself from that web of connection with a capital C, but we did. And it has just, we've been a miserable species ever since.
And I don't know why. It's so important to me to know the why. Like, as you were saying that, I was like, do the animals have any advice for us on why we did that? But the why of my separation hounds me. Yeah.
Well, I'm not getting anything other than
Yeah.
that is not important at this stage. What's important is to reconnect. And the first part of that is seeing other things as sentient, understanding that trees can talk to you, and you can talk to trees, and stones and leaves. Anything can be. We're all made of atoms. We're all made of the same atoms. So we're all, quantum physics has proven this. Yes, but it's not widely believed and practiced because, once again, there's a loss of control, and people really fear the loss of control.
I think about like the Gnostic texts or the lost Bible texts.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Mary Magdalene's.
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to link to the Mary Magdalene book in the notes for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so amazing. But talking about, and I can't remember which Gnostic text it was, but lifting a stone and you'll find me.
Mm-hmm.
That.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I just in my own life have experienced being raised in traditions where absolutely no animals cannot have souls. And at this point, after, it's 50 years, where I can have a conversation with somebody from a very traditionally religious place where it's not a great error to say that animals have souls. So
That's
even
wonderful. That's
tiny shift.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I taught a clinic once in Colorado. It was a multi-day clinic, and it was an intensive, actually. It went way deeper than a clinic. And that evening, and in the evening, I would show videos that I thought were, mind bending, well, not opening, mind opening. And so I showed a video of produced by Dawn Heyman, who was one of the early animal communicators. And she was giving a talk. And so she was talking about, and she was telling stories about the animals and her experiences and all this. And the next day, that woman had gotten up or she might have even done it in the night, but she packed up her horse and she left because animals can't talk and they don't have souls and they can't think. It was that strong. I mean, she lost her money and everything, because it was just never heard from her again. And she was very much a fan until she realized that I believed in animal communication, and then gone.
So that was
Black
a
and white.
hard no.
It was a hard no. And okay, I respect that. It was shocking to me, but that's her decision and I honor that.
And I think that for those who haven't allowed themselves to consider this in a way that fits in with their previous doctrines,
Mm-hmm.
that it is hard for people to lean into that because it's so incredibly, in a lot of ways, it's so incredibly easy to explore. We just walk outside and open up.
But if you are taught that the only reality is an authoritarian one, that the divine is an angry divine, that it's all about, not trespassing, about not doing wrong, that you have to be on, then that is a very scary place to go from utter control to freedom. That's a big leap. And so it can take a while or maybe not at all, because no, everybody either comes to this or not in their own time. There is a timing that's involved in it. And I'm just so grateful that more and more of the world is opening up to the fact that this is possible.
What messages, if any, does Gideon have for everyone that's listening today?
Well, he says he's kind of covered it. Let me see if there's anything else. Hang on a second.
And I know that when you
Heart love, he says. Whew. So when you have learned to trust what resonates with you, and you've learned to open the doors to your heart and your gut and your mind, then you may begin to feel, he says, in the presence of your horse or dog or cat or any other being, an all-enveloping love. He says, I'm not going to use the word unconditional because he says he doesn't like the word conditional at all. So it's a love like being wrapped in warm tenderness and compassion. And he calls that heart love. And boy, has he spent time seriously training me in that, in receiving it, in acknowledging in how to radiate it, and how to be in awareness of that, no matter what else is going on the outside. I mean, he is just like trained. He has a paper. One of his papers is a long one, but it's about my process of learning that heart love. But he said that heart love is what heals everything. Everything. He said if just more people would tune into the heart love and that feeling of expansion rather than contraction, then he says life would be far better. I guess that's the best way I can put it.
I've only recently began to experience that sense. And it came after a hard period where a lot of me got shaken loose. And on the other side of it, there were days, the first time it happened, I thought this is a fluke, but this sure feels nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it repeated, I was like, what is this weird internal euphoria? And I was
Yes.
so not comfortable feeling at peace.
Mm-hmm.
At first, it was kind of this knee jerk. I need to push this feeling away. We will not get work done with this feeling. And the more I've sank into that idea of it, and thank you so much, Gideon, for giving it a name. The more I sink into that, oh my gosh, it's so internally healing, but I feel its effects ripple out to my environment.
Exactly. Yes.
Like if I can stay in that space, I'm not making my waters any more muddy.
That's right. Yes, well said.
Thank you, Gideon.
Mm. Yeah, he's giving you a bow in my mind. He's bowing. He's grateful for the opportunity for those ripples to spread further.
That's so beautiful. So what's next for you and Gideon? What are you guys working on anything? Are you resting through the winter? Are you doing clinics? Are you doing books? Are you doing any more films?
Oh, well, the documentary just, there's every year there's a brief flurry of work for like 3 days or so, and then it goes on hold for because these folks aren't being paid. They're just doing it voluntarily, and they have to earn a living. Life intervenes, but it's slowly marching forward. So that's the only film. And then there's books in the work, but the time hasn't been right to put it all together yet in the way it needs to be put together. But they're in the works, several of them. And Gideon is plugged into a whole herd of horses all around the world who spend time holding that space for peace, a place of peace.
Mhm.
And it's the peace that you described that comes with the heart love. It's not like absence of conflict. It is inner peace where you're at one with everyone. So he's doing Gid is 31 and a half now, and he has compromised ligaments in his hind legs, and he has Cushing's disease, which is metabolic. So he could be very bored and unhappy in his dry lot, which is small. But he isn't, because he's connected, and he's connected to people, like people will say they need help with their horse, or they contact us for input, and we do all of that type of thing. And he has made it very clear to me, has been working on that for the last more than a year, that when he leaves his physical body, he is not leaving at all, that our connection will only get deeper. So that'll help me get through this, because we've been together for all these years, and we've done, the work that we've done has been, well, it's gone beyond what Gray and I did. All of that, going to places and competing and having all those experiences, was amazing, and it was awesome, and it was phenomenal. But to me, the rewards are nothing like what where Gideon has taken me.
I think about when you were with us here at the farm, and we went deeper than writing, but the whole point of our clinic together was to really dive deep after you and Sarah had connected at the Centered Writing Convention. I think it was in Asheville, and then you agreed to come down and teach us, and it was crazy how every single weather pattern came through that day.
Oh my goodness.
We had sunshine, warmth, we had cold, we had it was just like every 30.
Torrential downpour. Yes,
Yes,
torrential.
yeah.
Run for the awning. Torrential. Yes. Yeah, it was amazing. Mhm.
So thank you for showing up for us with that.
I'm an
But
event writer. Weather is not a concern. The whole time I was competing at the upper levels, I lived in Connecticut and had no indoor. So I did all my I had kids. I couldn't go south. People didn't do that then anyway. We just coped. You just adapt and cope.
and I grew up as in the hunter jumper world, but being raised by fox hunters, and fox hunters didn't like they went out.
Yeah, when you go out, It's like eventing. Yes.
Yeah.
This is life. You deal with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you and are you and Gideon available for people to contact you for sessions?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm going to link to all the places that people can find you. But I want to sit and marinate in everything that you've said. Like I just want to sink into it, and I want to have more conversations with you. But is there anything else that you would like to send out into the world before we end our call for today?
Just believe in what feels right to you and your heart and your gut. And if your heart and your gut are in discomfort, pay attention. Pay attention to that and believe enough in the truth of those signals to break old conditioning and habit patterns and belief systems and do something different that is more in alignment with what you are feeling in your heart and your gut. Believe in your own self and your own truth.
I thank you so much for all of this wisdom that you've shared with us today. And I thank you so much for agreeing to spend time to sit down to talk with me.
Oh, well, it's truly been a joy, Kim, and I look forward to other times should they come forward. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to share everything that I've lived and Gideon is professing.
This conversation with Kim Walnes is one that I know I'll be sitting with for a very long time, and I hope you will too. There's so much to take in, from the depth of her journey with the Gray Goose and Gideon to the wisdom she carries about trust, connection, and the way we truly listen. If this conversation spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to go deeper, you can find all the links to connect with Kim Walnes, her work, and the resources she mentioned in the show notes for this episode. You can also keep the conversation going with me on social media or through Stable Roots on Substack, where I explore these themes in writing. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for being a part of a space where we get to ask big questions, challenge the old ways of thinking, and lean into what feels true. I'll see you next time. Love, Kim.